Hey world, welcome back to Keats Universe. So for a very long time, or a very significant portion of my life, I have always regarded myself as a liberal. Now, growing up in the 90s in Ireland, I was surrounded by a lot of conservative Catholic ideologies. While my own family was far from conservative, still Catholic, but not conservative, that presence of Catholic conservatism was still very much all around me. So my instincts as a rebellious teen of that era was to fight against that and embrace my individuality at all costs. I've always been very outspoken in regards to many of the social issues, from sexism to racism to homophobia. This idea of progressiveness and equality at that time is what it meant to me to be a liberal. But as I got older, I started to notice that while liberals care so much about the progressive social issues, they tend not to see a connection from social inequality to the inequality inflicted by the economy. More specifically, a capitalist economic structure. From what I've seen, the closest liberals get to making any sort of real distinction of that is the gender wage gap, which is still a very important issue and should be taken with complete seriousness. However, the level of economic inequality in capitalist society is much more widespread. It is a system that continues to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. It is a system that allows unequal distribution of income and unequal opportunity between different groups of society. And yes, I am going to quote Bernie Sanders. Look, whether you agree with him or not, as far as I am concerned, he is right on the mark when he says, "A society cannot sustain itself when so few have so much, while so many have so little." And he also says, and has made this point quite often, when the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%, that is ethically and morally wrong. I could not agree more. And yes, obviously Sanders is talking about the American economy. However, so many other parts of the world have this same problem of total economic inequality, which in turn has so many struggling to pay household bills, not able to pay their rent, their mortgages, barely able to afford food. In Ireland, we have a cost of living crisis. And I know Ireland is not the only country that has this problem, and it is a very serious problem that we need to be taking seriously. Because on top of that, we also have a homelessness crisis. Yes, here in Ireland, but not just Ireland, in many other parts of the world too, we have this massive homeless crisis. But with so much corruption and economic inequality, it is this constant vicious cycle. And what really gave me the final push in the direction of socialism was actually the COVID-19 pandemic. And no, I don't mean the virus itself, but more how a lot of corporate entities and other companies behaved and responded to this disaster. And sure, to their credit, a lot of them did actually close operations during the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, but many others cut corners, looked for loopholes whenever they could, and thus exploited a lot of people in the process. By putting those people in vulnerable positions, essentially putting profit before people, which is my core problem with capitalism, treating the working class essentially like slaves and practically like numbers. And to me, that is fascist. That is unaccountable greed. One example of this, which often sticks out to me as a sore thumb, at least in my country, is Keelings. For those of you not from Ireland who are unfamiliar with Keelings, Keelings is a fruit production company based in Ireland. Very well known for their strawberries, for example. But since the pandemic, I haven't given Keelings a single cent after the stunt that they pulled. So, during the pandemic, Keelings flew over seasonal workers from Bulgaria in order to carry out a strawberry harvest in Dublin. Because they were afraid their strawberries would go bad and they'd lose a lot of money. Because that's all it comes down to at the end of the day, folks. Making money. More interested in saving money than saving lives, even during a health crisis. To paint the picture here, they flew over almost 200 people from Bulgaria to Ireland in the height of the pandemic. On a plane, which was a very tight and enclosed space. And sure, yes, they made them isolate for 14 days, but that doesn't really make it that much better. So to put things into perspective, they basically didn't bat an eyelid over potentially putting 200 lives at risk, all for saving some money and preventing a little bit of profit loss. They're just a typical capitalist corporation putting profit before people, yet again. I mean, I can live without strawberries if I have to, and believe you me, I love strawberries. But I still won't buy them from Keelings. But these companies, these greedy, rich, shameless capitalists, are far too corrupt for their own good. Honestly, I was already leaning towards socialismville as it was, but these greedy, shameless corporations, they just really prove to me just how irredeemably evil capitalism is. So after much thought and much reading, I have determined that capitalism is not worth saving. It is also not sustainable. In my view, we would be much better off transitioning from capitalism to socialism. Things will be much better if the working class, or as we leftists like to say, the proletariats, controlled the means of production. We would have much more economic equality, more freedom, and honestly, just a better life. And look, I'm not saying I know everything about leftism, especially when it comes to more specific forms of theory, and I am reading up on a lot more theory, especially when it comes to Marx. But one thing I do know for certain is that capitalism does not serve the people as a whole. It only serves a tiny minority of wealthy elites, while the rest of us have to scramble about for the scraps left over. That's not the kind of world I want to live in, and that's not the kind of world I think we should be striving for. You see, the problem with liberalism is it simply doesn't go far enough. Some would even argue, and quite understandably so, that liberalism really isn't a left-wing position at all. It's more accurately described as, or defined as, a centrist position. Socialism, in my view, is a philosophy that really analyzes all of the world's problems and questions all of those problems. Whereas liberalism, it basically teaches and preaches to question things only when it's convenient to question those certain things. Liberalism teaches us oftentimes we shouldn't bite the hand that feeds us. But the reality is, it is often very necessary to bite on that hand. That very hand is arguably smothering us. And it is far from error-free, far from without question, or anything like that. And when I say smothering, I'm not being dramatic. I'm referring to some of the many forms of gaslighting rhetoric, such as, well, capitalism may not be perfect, but nope, sorry, I am checked out of supporting capitalism. That ship has sailed. I am no longer accepting the gaslighting, I am no longer accepting the excuses, and I am no longer accepting the false promises. To that end, I no longer consider myself a liberal. I call myself a leftist, proudly, or more specifically, a socialist. And so that is where I am going to leave today's video. I will perhaps flesh out this conversation in future videos, concentrating on more specifics in regards to leftism and my thoughts on it. So thank you so very much for watching. Feel free to check out today's source links down below in the description box, along with links to my social network accounts if you are interested in following me on social media, that is. And as a side note, I also moderate on the subreddit Leftist, so if that piques your interest, feel free to sub to that too. There will be a link down below if you are interested. Until next time, bye world!